Someone was living in my house and he wasn't alone. I've always loved older homes, with their creaky floors and rich histories. So when I finally bought my first house, I went for a charming, century-old Victorian in a quiet neighborhood. It needed some work, but that was part of the appeal. I wanted to restore it to its former glory. The first few months were uneventful, just the usual renovations and getting settled in. But then I started noticing odd things. Doors that I was sure I had closed would be slightly ajar. Lights would flicker for no reason, even after I replaced the bulbs. I chalked it up to the quirks of an old house. One day, while cleaning out the basement, I discovered a small door in the corner, hidden behind some old boxes. It was only about 3 feet tall, almost like a door for a child. I hadn't noticed it before, and my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and found a narrow, dark crawl space that seemed to run the length of the house. The space was cramped and dusty, but I could see some old, rusted tools and what looked like a few pieces of broken furniture scattered around. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I did wonder why someone would leave those things down there. A few nights later, I was jolted awake by a loud thump coming from the basement. My heart raced as I listened, trying to convince myself that it was just the house settling. But then I heard it again, another thump, followed by the sound of something scraping against the floor. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way down to the basement. The air was cold and musty, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. As I descended the stairs, the noises stopped. The basement was eerily silent. I swept the beam of the flashlight across the room, checking for anything out of place. That's when I noticed the small door to the crawl space. It was open. I was sure I had closed it after I found it, but now it was slightly ajar, just like those doors upstairs. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to turn around and go back to bed. But something compelled me to look inside. I crouched down and shone the flashlight into the crawl space, but I couldn't see anything unusual. Just the same old tools and debris. I was about to close the door when I heard a faint rustling sound. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was coming from inside the crawl space. I leaned in a little closer, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A pair of eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly, casting eerie shadows across the walls. In the dim light, I saw a figure emerge from the crawl space. It was a man, filthy and disheveled, his clothes tattered and his skin pale and sickly. He crawled out slowly, I was frozen in place, unable like a predator stalking its unable prey. To move. The man stood up, towering over me, and in that moment, I noticed something even more horrifying. He had a large, rusted knife in his hand. Finally, my survival instincts kicked in. I turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me and locking it. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed my phone, and called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. The police arrived within minutes, but when they searched the basement, the man was gone. They found signs that someone had been living in the crawl space for a long time. Old blankets, food wrappers, and even a makeshift bed made from dirty rags. But there was no sign of the man himself. The officers told me that he had probably been living there long before I moved in, maybe even years. They speculated that he used the crawl space to hide during the day and came out at night when the house was quiet. I couldn't stay in the house after that. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend, too terrified to sleep. I eventually sold the house at a loss, unable to shake the memory of those eyes staring at me from the darkness. To this day, I still have nightmares about that man. I wonder if he's still out there, lurking in someone else's crawl space, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself.